Thank you very much. So who was here for the last panel? Raise your hand. Okay, who was here for the last panel and the one before? Goodness me, so you will have to bear with me for another 75 minutes. I'm very sorry for that. Thank you very much for being here. This is obviously a very important discussion, and we're very privileged to be joined by our hostess, the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Slovenia, Tanja Fajon. So great many thanks to you, to your outstanding team, amid very challenging circumstances, to have again brought this up together. This is such a wonderful and stimulating place to meet up with new people and be challenged. And it's not that common actually to be challenged. Most of the time we're trapped into bubbles. So there have been many topics, but of course Europe has been on the top of the list, and we've been hearing a lot about Europe, enlargement, leadership. So we'll try to have to drive that conversation in such a way that we don't repeat ourselves, and have a discussion that is as interactive as possible. So we have many panelists, and if I were to go through their CV, I think we would still be there next year for the next forum. So I will just very briefly introduce them, although they need no introduction. I'll start with you, Madam Deputy Prime Minister, Tanja Fajon, who has been driving so much since you arrived last year, and I must say that in spite of the sad circumstances in which this forum is taking place, there has been an outstanding news. It's that Slovenia, as all of you know by now, has been elected for a 2-year term in the UN Security Council, and I think this is outstanding news for Slovenia, but also for Europe. So we look forward to working with you for the next 2 years, and I guess that there will be a lot on the horizon for you. With us today as well, Arancha González, who is currently the Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs, one of the best ranked school in international and foreign policy. Before that, she served as Foreign and Europe Minister of the Kingdom of Spain, and served before that many other responsibilities, but Chief of Staff to the head of the World Trade Organization at a very challenging time. So thank you very much to be with us. We're also very happy to be joined by a kind of other dean. So I wanted to be a bit provocative and ask who was at the helm of the best school, but I will not dare ask the question. We'll wait until the end of the panel. So Federica Mogherini, who is the Rector of the College of Europe, President both Belgium and Poland, and before that she was obviously Executive Vice President of the European Commission, High Representative for Foreign Security Policy, and before that Foreign Minister of the Italian Republic. Thank you very much for being with us. And we also have two senior representatives of the region. To my right, Foreign Minister from, I don't know what that means. I guess it's about Europe, Vassal, a leader. I don't know what that means. But we have Foreign Minister Wlachovský from the Republic of Slovakia. As you know, Slovakia will go to vote next year, so it's an important time for the country. And last but not least, Mr. Marichikj, who is the Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs of North Macedonia. Thank you very much for being with us today. So as you can see, we have a very diverse kind of sociology on the panel, and I hope we can leverage that as much as we can. I will not dive into the background. We all know it. We've now been 18 months into the war in Ukraine, and we also have sensed the tremendous acceleration of the impact of climate change, starting with here, for instance, across Europe, across the so-called global south. No one is being spared, and we see that kind of snowball effect where you have these interconnected crises playing in one another and multiplying the effect on mostly the most vulnerable communities in both Europe, across OECD economies, and the global south. I guess I can say that before the COVID pandemic, and naturally before the war in Ukraine, no one, first of all the EU itself, would have imagined that the EU would have demonstrated such leadership and such capacity to, get together and be as daring as going towards a mutual debt, for instance, and now there are even talks about mutual security procurement. So I guess one of the main lessons, and I look at the title Global Leader of Vassal, obviously it's a very provocative title, but is that the means are there. The psychological capability of Europe is there. They are the means to be a leader. But of course there are some things in the horizon that still make us think, believe, or fear that we might still be lagging behind, or to quote the French president, that we are still very much aligned with the the United States, and that we should be able to afford the luxury to, I quote him, pick up our crises. Well, I don't know whether we have that luxury. We are now, of course, still committed to the transatlantic community, and I know it's a very important topic to the Western Balkans, but we also have strategic interests, especially in Southeast Asia and China, without the leadership of which such an important topic as climate change cannot be properly addressed. So I'd like to start with you, Madam Deputy Prime Minister, and the first question. It has been an intense year for you, obviously, and I stress the wonderful news of having Slovenia in the United Nations Security Council. How to keep a balance in this very unstable and uncertain world of strategic alliances and interest at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions? There's even a term that was coined by an American political scientist. We live in an era of geopolitical recession.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would just like to say that you know, hosting such an event, 2 days of very intensive contacts and meetings, when I came to the room and I looked to the title, because they were just putting me from one event to another, I said, oh, goodbye Europe, that's a good panel they put me in, so maybe hope not with a purpose, but I think it's a very important discussion. I had an amazing experience in the last year when I was doing a campaign for the UN Security Council. Actually, it was a big privilege, but it was also a big learning lesson, because I had a chance to travel all around the globe and speak with partners I've never spoken before, or even Slovenia didn't have traditional contacts. So what I realized in many parts, where I was in India or in Africa or Latin America or Caribbean even, that in fact, it's so important that we hear each other, that we listen to each other. We realize we have so many same challenges around the globe that we have to address them together, and at the same time, we have never been so deeply polarized and divided as we are today. If you look, for example, the institutions or the Security Council, or also Europe after the Europe is united, but we still, you know, have our own challenges inside the institutions. But what is important for Europe, I think, first, that we are strong inside, and this is now what we are, in a way, reflecting with the war in Ukraine. There is an amazing unity. There is also an amazing solidarity. If I look just an experience from Slovenia in the last few weeks, I can tell you from the first day we felt we are not alone. And this was this European and international solidarity that was with us. And it's important we embrace it and we really try to push it. Why I'm saying as it's solidarity is so important, and solidarity is also multilateralism, that we work together on the global level, it's extremely important. And for Europe to be a credible partner, it's important that we are capable of respecting principles of international law, of the rule of law, of the solidarity, of the mechanisms that are in place. That means also how are we reflecting to crises all around the world, that we are honest, that we reflect in the same way to the crisis around. Most often I heard a big criticism that we are not honest, that we are not embracing or being humble, that we are more ignorant to the other parts of the world. And that is what we have to bear in mind. And I would say for Europeans that too often I heard like the criticism West against the rest, or with this deeply polarized world, how to be consistency. Many partners around the globe was telling me, you have to be consistent with your approach. And this is true. We need each other today, I believe, stronger than ever. And also European Union, I was elaborating on the formula how to address today's topic, like on one hand, how to make a successful and competitive European Union. We could address 3 E, for example, engagement, enlargement, evolution, and everything I could elaborate. Engagement means that we embrace all parts of the globe. Enlargement, that we enlarge, we discuss about the Western Balkans for 20 years, Eastern neighborhood, and evolution, that means that we are also adapting our mechanisms to discuss because some are maybe old-fashioned, like discussion today that is opening on qualified majority vote, but this is what comes still. And on the other hand, how the EU can be acting, another 3E I will put forward, it's eagerness, expedience, experience. And all this I could develop so on both hands, and we could have a nice formula, you know, to be a competitive, successful Europe for the future. Just a little bit to you know, play with the words and what we can do better for our Europe in the future.
Thank you very much. I guess that one of the main thing that you've highlighted is our perception. I think power and perception matters for power projection. There's something we've been touching, covering a lot in previous discussions, is the cost of fragmentation and what it means for a geopolitical power like Europe. And I'd like to turn to you, Foreign Minister Wlachovský. Slovakia has had the most consistent economic growth in the whole Eurozone, actually outperforming Ireland. And you actually are an export-driven country. And I would imagine that the kind of discussion about decoupling, to some extent de-risking, and seeing China deciding to, you know, mostly rely on its own domestic output and production, might be an issue for you.
Thank you. Does it work? Yeah. Thank you. And first of all, I'm really glad to be here in Bled. It's my first time in a forum, and it's so far it's perfect. The debates, the meeting with partners, and I want to congratulate Tanja on this. And to come back to your question, and also to touch upon the thought-provoking title of this panel, I think it's the leader versus vassal. It's not entirely correct. I think leadership is not only about hegemony, but also about the partnership. And I used to work as a director of strategic communication, and I would like to continue what Tanja said, that the words are important. And actually, this dichotomy, this concept, the EU as a vassal of the United States, is a concept which is pushed by Russia on us. That's the way how they want to present the European Union. And the problem with Russia's approach to the European Union is that they neither like it nor understand the concept of the European Union, and as such, they want to diminish the impact of the European Union. And I think they were very much surprised by the reaction of the European Union on the Russian aggression towards Ukraine, and on the fact that we were able to be united. And coming to your question about competitiveness and about the industry, and I think one of the challenges we are facing is here in Slovakia is that we are a country which in recent years strongly developed the automotive industry, but the way we have structured our economy is vulnerable to robotics, and we can slowly but surely lose a lot of jobs due to that. So we have to think about it, how to adjust to knowledge-based economy. That's one of the challenges we facing, and we as a Europe, we are facing the challenge that we very often just focus on ourselves and do not see the bigger picture and how we have to maintain competitiveness vis-a-vis other global actors like US, like China, and in a world of politics, but also in a world of economy.
So it's the question of self-perception as well. I'd like to go back on really that very important topic of perception, and I think that matters whether we talk about vassal or leader. And I'd like to turn to you, Madam González. The EU has actually, when we look at the figures, committed more to Ukraine in military, financial, and humanitarian aid than the United States, in spite of what many might feel or think or read, or what some observers say. And the fact that I say in spite of means that it seems that the EU, but perhaps it's a collective issue, everyone here is responsible, is not able to defend its greatest achievements. And it seems to be a kind of chronic complex, is it not?
So thank you, Tanja, first for hosting us in what is effectively a difficult situation in this country. We appreciate it doubly. I think it's become commonplace to belittle Europe, to fear China, and to elevate the US. So you're going to allow me to row against the current for a moment. Let's look at China. For 10 years, we have been underestimating China's desire to be the world #1. And I feel that for the last 10 months, we are overestimating the ability of China to deal with the internal challenges that it has, and in particular, a very important one on the economy, which is that you cannot have a very well-functioning economy that is driven by a political party. Let me look at the US. We obviously admire the incredible innovative capacity of the American economy, the competitiveness, the creativity, the innovation. But this country is facing the prospect that a candidate to president of the country is a person, is facing that prospect. Not saying that this will be, but this is a person that is prosecuted, if not sentenced, under criminal law, under a legislation concerning mafia. So, again, this is not to diminish the incredible capacity of this country. This is to point also at the weaknesses that we see in the US, who is not just our partner, it's our ally. It's the country with whom we share the most intimate relationship, which is defense and security. So we have reasons to be slightly concerned. Now let's look at the European Union. I think the biggest problem we have is a lack of confidence in ourselves and an abusive tendency to look at what's not working without looking at what is working. So, of course, just like you, Tanja, for the end part of the conversation, I look at what's not working. I have a list that I've prepared, but I like to look at what's working. I think it's been phenomenal that we've been able to hold together in the middle of a war that is, by nature, given the tough measures we've taken, divisive. I want to acknowledge that we are in the midst of an incredibly complicated, difficult path, energy transition, but we are making it. I want to put into sharper focus the incredible effort that solidarity that the European Union is having. And this solidarity is not just vis-à-vis Ukraine, it's also with the rest of the world, leading internationally on themes that the EU believes are important for itself, but for the world, on climate change, on financial stability. So, Gregoire, allow me to be a little bit more optimistic, plead for a little bit more of a bolder attitude vis-à-vis Europe, because the tasks we have ahead will necessitate a much bolder Europe.
I must apologize for my chronic depressive look at the current state of Europe, but thank you very much for pushing us to, and that's what matters, I think, in terms of mindset, going against the current and looking where our strengths lie and where our partners, allies, weaknesses lie as well. I'd like to turn to you, Deputy Prime Minister Marichikj. We have seen heard two initiatives focusing on enlargement recently, namely the Austrian Foreign Minister Schallenberger, who launched the Friends of the Western Balkans, a set of 7 EU countries committed to speeding up the process of EU accession to Western Balkan states. And yesterday, little breaking news, there was the conference of the ambassadors in Paris, and President Macron came up with a new idea, that is called, I quote, a multi-speed Europe, whatever that means, he didn't define it, to cope with enlargement. And he stressed that this comes on top of his plan for the European political community. So there seems to be a lot of initiatives devoted to the Balkans, but that does not mean that you will be granted EU membership for the near future. So the question is, do you take this as a kind of incentive to be patient, or as a kind of feature of frustration? Is that
all these easy questions? Thank you so much. I just want to thank you for the opportunity. We are experienced candidate country. Already from 2005 we have got the candidate status, so we have patience, and none of these initiatives is new actually. We have heard them many times. I always joke with my Montenegrin friends when they say we are celebrating the first 10 years of negotiations with the EU, which means there will be the second 10 years and then who knows how many decades. I want first of all to express our deepest condolences, solidarity and loyalty and partnership with Slovenia and Slovenian people. And I think that whatever happens here, we feel it as also our happiness or our bad luck. So we are here to help always when Slovenia needs it. And I'm mentioning this deliberately because I think that the European Union has demonstrated strength in this situation. And I think the only answer to this topic, global Vassal or global leader, is how much the European Union can demonstrate strength in times of crisis. This was key for the Western Balkans. Let me give you a few examples and answer to your important questions. When the COVID crisis started, we were desperately asking for vaccines around the world. The aid from European Union that arrived was substantial and helped us a lot, but it arrived a bit later. The first to help was one neighboring country with Chinese and with Russian vaccines. When the war in Ukraine started and when North Macedonia was one of the first countries to embrace the sanctions against Russia, and we dismissed 11 Russian diplomats from the embassy in Skopje, which for the size of our country is a lot. Then when that happened, we were knocking on the doors in Prague, because it was the Czech presidency, at those times when the crisis occurred at a very high time, and in Brussels, to ask that this time, when we have harsh energy crisis on the door and harsh food crisis on the door, that EU is the first to help, that this is the most important thing. Not the size of the help, not what you do, but to be the first, because we cannot feel alone when we fight for values, for European values in Ukraine. And it came. It came in form of 80 million euro assistance for energy and a lot more channels for assistance, which was crucial for the people of North Macedonia to understand that EU cares for us as their partners and future members. I think that this is the Ukrainian crisis, the war in Ukraine, the Russian aggression was the turning point. This is the sobering moment for the European Union. This is why it's so important. So it's in my opinion, it's not a theoretic question. It's always a concrete question whether EU will be a global leader or global vassal. It will be leader as long as it demonstrates strength in times of crisis for their own partners that defend the European values across the continent and across the globe. How can that be translated in the enlargement policy and in what used to be the Eastern Partnership? Now it's not Eastern Partnership anymore because Ukraine and Moldova are considered to be candidates. They are candidates and they have European perspective. The European enlargement policy is the strongest policy of European Union on the European continent for the European countries that are not already in the EU. The more people of our countries believe that it's tangible and it is actually going to happen, the stronger will be the voice of the European Union. Because all the security crises in the Western Balkans were resolved through the transatlantic partnership between the US and the European Union, diplomacy or military action. For North Macedonia, that diplomacy of High Rep Solana at that time and George Robertson, as Secretary General of NATO, was crucial to save our country for a Bosnia-like war. It was crucial to stop the conflict in the initial stage and pacify the country and create a successful model of managing cultural differences. But the glue, the societal glue, was the European integration, the future membership of the European Union. This is what drives the country forward. You know, back in 2005, 6, 7, 8, when a European ambassador would call for a press conference, you would see hundreds of cameras and very high interest. Whatever the ambassador would say, or a country report would come out, it would be a topic for 3 weeks in the country, or a month, conferences, TV shows, etc. Today, when we have the country report, it's in the news for 1 minute. Nobody cares. Not a lot. Maybe a few civil society organizations will make statements. Nobody cares. This is my fear. This is what I was explaining to the representatives of France and European Union last year when they were tabling the French proposal, that we are afraid that without a tangible accession plan and date, nobody will care what the European Union says, because the Russian strategy in the Western Balkans is extremely simple. They say EU doesn't work for you. It works for rich Western countries, but not for you. They don't want you there. This is why I think that this partnership is extremely important. This is why I value very high the speech of President Michel yesterday, because for the first time, after Croatia has acceded to the EU, some EU official is making a time reference for the future enlargement. This is very important, and we should build up on this. I have followed the President Macron's statement, and we expect that. It's nothing new. As I said, we are an experienced candidate. We have heard everything. But that means that the reforms in the EU and the reforms in the Western Balkans need to happen at the same time and come together in 2030. I will finish with one sentence on China. I think that transatlantic partnership is irreplaceable for the strength of the European Union, because it is based and should be based on values. We remember how tragically finished the flirting with Gaddafi. We remember how tragically finished the flirting with Putin, and don't think that it will be any different if we go on flirting with China. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And you're referring to reform, and I'd like to turn to you, Rector Mogherini, regarding reform. It's been a year since the speech of Chancellor Scholz in Prague, during which he addressed the issue of the enlargement, but he stressed that enlargement was necessary, enlargement would happen, but would call for deeper integration, such as qualified voting. I don't know whether that applies to qualified voting, but apparently it's, well, absolutely. So the question to you, given perhaps the kind of freedom you have now that you might not have enjoyed when in your previous responsibility, is what is the, how shall I talk, whether it's likelihood or rather relevance of relinquishing unanimity in foreign policy? Is this something that, let's put it that way, had it been in force under your tenure as High Representative, would that have changed things tremendously?
No. First, then I'll elaborate on that. But first, let me thank Tanja and all friends that have been behind this wonderful gathering. I was here at the Wlachovský Forum in 2017, and actually it's great to be back and have the time to enjoy the panels, listen to the panels, and meet people. And it's great. You've done a great job, especially considering what Slovenia has gone through recently. And let me also join colleagues and friends in expressing solidarity and all support to the Slovenian people that, as an Italian, I feel more than neighbors, like brothers and sisters. So thank you for hosting us in this endeavor, and thank you also for the topic, because yes, it's challenging, stimulating. But I would like to follow up on Arancha's optimism, and it has to do with the unanimity too. Now I have the luxury of zooming out a bit. So if you allow me. Can I bring you back to 2016, June 2016? Referendum in the UK, decision to leave. And in the European Council, that happened in the end of June 2016, only a few days after the UK referendum, the big fear was that that was the beginning of the end. And you might remember that. Everybody was thinking of that. Everybody was writing or talking about that. And everybody was assuming that the UK would have been only the first one of a long series of member states that would have left. And look at us now. So I'm even more provocatively optimistic than you are, Arancha, if you allow me. I think that what happened with the reaction to the pandemic of the European Union has been historical. I would have never dreamt of something like that. The financial mechanism that was put in place, even a couple of weeks before, anyone in Brussels would have told you, and in capitals even more so, would have told you that this would have been possible at all. And Juncker tried so much. No way. And it happened. If you think of the extension of the competences, I mean, the Commission did things that were not in the treaties. And it happened. And they did it because actually the European Union is ready and is capable of doing extraordinary things, fast, united, and relevant, which are the three things that normally you don't associate to the European Union, when there is the political feeling of pressure and urgency. It doesn't happen when the member states don't have the same feeling of urgency and priority. But once we're all on the same page of, okay, this is important, we need to deliver, we need to react, then it happens, and it's fast, united, and relevant. So much that actually, I believe that without the European Union, we would have not literally survived the COVID time across Europe. And maybe I say this because my country was hit first and hardest, but I think we can say this for all countries in the European continent, not only in the European Union. Without the European Union, we wouldn't have overcome the COVID crisis as we have done. Still with too many losses, time was not as fast as it could have been, but finally, both from the sanitary measures, the vaccines and everything else, maybe only Belgium would have managed, but so first. And then the war in Ukraine, the reaction to the war in Ukraine was impressively unanimous, sure, with discussions. But you have discussions also in national governments. I mean, you have a coalition government in any given country, you have discussions before Council of Ministers, right? And you have discussions among the 27, at my times 28. But I always was saying, don't look at the doorsteps of the ministers when they enter the Council. Obviously, that is the moment when they have to mark the national positions. They have to go back home and then say, I raised my point. Look at the press conference at the end of the Council. We have decided together to do this, and that is relevant. It's okay to have different voices. The important thing is that these different voices come to a common decision and a common course of action. So, to tell you the truth, at my times, then I know times have changed, so it might not be the same now, but out of my own experience, 2014, 2019, I never experienced ever a problem of unanimity vote in decision-making in the Foreign Affairs Council. And as you know, the Foreign Affairs Council meets at least once a month. And I would add to that, as the High Representative also sits at the European Council, I also never experienced a unanimity issue at the European Council level. Again, it might be different today. What I experienced was the consistency element. You decide something. I think journalists call it in Brussels, or at least used to call it in Brussels, the syndrome of ground zero, because you move from ground 50 at the time in the previous council meeting, then you go down to ground zero where you have the press room, and what was decided on the 50th floor together was referred on the zero on the press room as the European Union has decided or Brussels has decided. The Belgians are the only ones that cannot do that, but otherwise, ministers sometimes tend to forget that it's not the European Union that decides, but it's themselves deciding something together. So my problem, at least the problem I experienced during my 5 years in office, was the distance between a decision that was taken unanimously altogether without too much of an issue, well, a lot of work, because that requires a lot of work to prepare decisions, and then the implementation of the decision. Because foreign policy is not a legislative act. It's a matter of belief. It's the symbolism, it's the contacts, it's the visits, it's the démarche, it's all the work that you do behind the decision that you take. But for me, it's a matter of ownership, and it's a matter of having all member states feeling that the EU foreign policy is their own foreign policy, and that the EU decisions empower the national decisions to grow. Because as great as we are, we're definitely a global leader. On this, I fully align with what Arancha said. We have a self-perception problem. We feel we are not adequate to our own standards and bars that are very, very high, but look from the outside. I mean, I was High Representative in the time of the Trump administration, so I can tell you, the rest of the world was looking to us for leadership and for shelter, if I may. They were looking at us on trade, on human rights, on multilateralism, on the UN system, on anything, and saying, can we work with you? Because we had the critical mass under which some other partners, even big ones, had to somehow find their place. They needed an umbrella. So maybe this is not coming back. Hopefully this is not coming back next year. But sometimes we underestimate our strengths. And by doing so, we risk not to use our strengths, because if you're not aware of your strengths, then you're not exercising it enough. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future in terms of the European Union, because what we've done in this last 2-3 years is something completely unexpected in positive terms. And yes, you might change and reform rules, decision-making procedures, but when there is the political will, we find a way. In this, the European Union is very Balkan. If you want to do it, you find a way to do it. But you need this sense of political priority. Normally, in my experience, if the debate goes too much on we need to reform the decision-making, the institutions, the treaties, don't mention it even, in order to, I might be wrong, but this normally for me hides a lack of political will. In Italian we have a say that is almost not translatable in English, that is, if you think something bad, you're making a sin, but you're probably right. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But only one thing I want to add, and of which I'm not too proud. I'm very proud of the European Union in many different things, as I mentioned, basically everything we've done, including the work on defense that has grown a lot in this last couple of years. On the Balkans. I've said it also when I was in office. I mean, there's not much difference between what I was saying when I was in office and now. And I was free before, and I was convinced of what I was doing already then. We did one mistake. The Council did one mistake in not opening negotiation accession talks with Albania and North Macedonia before the end of the term in 2019. Luckily, that was solved afterwards. It's a bit sad for me to see that the renewed emphasis on enlargement needed a war. But at least I hope we'll now get serious on that. It can be done, I think, quickly, and it must be done quickly. We always take, from the European Union perspective, the argument of what of a benefit would be for the region or for the candidate countries. My point is that this is something the European Union needs for security, for the sociology of the European Union. We need younger countries enthusiastic about the European perspective to join, because this is something we're lacking in our own member states, especially the old ones, but also the most recent ones. We need this new energy, and we need it from security to anything else. We need to fill in the gap of this hole that we have at the center of the map.
Thank you very much for that very insightful testimony. When we look at the structure of the geopolitical chessboard, if I might use that word, we see a clear resurgence of empires of very different natures. And Europe is obviously a post-imperialistic space. But in a very insightful piece in Foreign Affairs, renowned British historian Timothy Garton Ash developed the argument according to which Europe, paradoxically enough, needed to think like an empire. And there is a very interesting confession he makes. He met earlier this year in February with the foreign minister of Ukraine, Dmytro Koluba. And the foreign minister told him, we want to join Europe but Europe needs to be a liberal empire, because it is the only way to defeat resurging traditional military-driven empires. And Timothy Garton Ash goes on pinning down 3 key aspects that Europe would need to be that kind of liberal empire. And listening to what we've heard, seems we have most of it. The first is sufficient degree of unity. And one would guess that after COVID and the sanctions and the war, 18 months after it started, we more or less have it. Will it last? Well, that's a question to political leaders in the room and to citizens as well. The second is central authority. Well, that is perhaps a bit more politically sensitive. And the third is effective decision-making. So when's the question on whether we need to reform a few mechanisms, especially if we want to grow, and we actually need to grow. So, and he goes on saying that it's a different kind of empire because it's based on, I quote, a voluntary membership and democratic consent. So my question, and you are current or former members of governments, can this argument take root? I'm sure the French would love it. I think they're very sad that it doesn't come from them, but from the Ukrainians. But the question is, can this take root? And we have elections in important countries in Europe, and the pro-European movement are not necessarily a topic in the polls.
When I was listening now, especially Arancha and Federica, because I find a lot of inspiration in the work of the 2 ladies in academia now. I was thinking that you can always have, you know, the imagination of 2 sides of the coins on the same topic. So I like the approach of optimism. Once you find yourself, like myself, being 20 years in a way related to the institutions, I'm often too self-critical and not too self-confident. And this is right. We maybe have to be more self-confident. I very much agree with you with the results we have achieved, and also with how the rest of the world can look upon our values and this values-based approach that we have, based on solidarity, democracy, the rule of law, human rights. And when I come to the national debate, quite often, I can say on the experience of Slovenia, the European topics or affairs, we are not really discussing them, even if we are trying to. But we are discussing them mostly when it goes wrong. Because when it goes wrong, it's the easiest to blame Brussels. When it goes good, it's the easiest to praise yourself. And this is quite often the narrative. I mean, when we were before the enlargement in 2004 and afterwards, we had a great enthusiasm. And still in Slovenia, there is a quite strong support. Even today, I would say, and you had a good point, after Brexit, there was really not a single country that wanted to exit the EU. The opposite, and even the reflection of Trump and what was happening in the US had a consequence. The Union was pretty strong with the members together. The same with COVID. Of course, it always, first crisis reflects in a way of selfishness or egoism, and that was the case after COVID. But very immediately, we somehow reset the mechanism and we work together. The same now with the war in Ukraine, because we are defending our values. So I think if we really come back to the values, why the Union was established in the first place was exactly, to bring nations together on the basis of poverty, wars, instability, and so on. And maybe sometimes we have to come back to the roots, why we created European Union, and what is important. And today's young generation, and again, I come to Slovenia, they don't have this historic memory. For them, the EU is self-given. It's what we live without borders, we live with a common currency, we have possibility of education, and so on and so forth. So we have maybe to change also the narrative, how we communicate European values and European institutions and what we are really trying to achieve together to the young generation. And this is education, so I add another E to my first theory. But it's very important. And it's important that we are in a self-confident way present what we are doing good, but also to reflect and be self-critical for the things where we are not consistent and what we are not doing good. And here we have quite some weaknesses. And maybe, we have all a lot of experiences I see with the faces on the EU institutions. We are at certain crossroads, how this European Union with the enlargement, with the global challenges, with a divided world, with positioning to Indo-Pacific, to other parts of the world, how we are going ahead. And I'm strongly, as I'm a strong European, committed that we need each other, maybe even more than ever before, including with the Western Balkan, including with the Eastern neighborhood, all that we are based on the same values and search new partners. And this is what was also my lesson in the last year, that the world in many parts that was maybe connected more to Russia or to China is also searching new partners. Like we had a very good meeting with Latin America recently in Brussels. And it's an amazing pool and opportunity that was lost for several years. And these alliances, or Central Asia, or name it, or Africa, it's extremely important that we work together and search these like-minded and value-based countries to work together. So I'm also want to be optimistic, and just to make a final remark, because I think optimism is extremely important. In political life, we very quickly fall into pessimism, and then we don't give any hope and any good ideas and solutions to the people. So it's good to have also optimism-based approach.
Thank you very much. Does someone want to react on the liberal empire, perhaps? Or?
Yeah. If I may, every foreign policy starts at home. And the problem of liberal empire lies exactly there, that we are more popular outside than inside. At least I have this impression that if you look where do you see the flags of European Union waving, well, you will have to go to Ukraine. That's where they are waving. That's where the optimism is there. Where there is a will to join. And we have a problem back home to sell to our own constituencies why this project is that good that some others want to join us, but we are failing in convincing ourselves that it's worth it. And we have a big job there. So that's about the liberal empire that, in my view, it wasn't an accident that it was said by Dmytro Kuleba and no one from within. That's one thing. The other thing is that we should be very frank in our analysis also. We mentioned COVID several times. And yes, the reaction of the European Union was strong, the solidarity was strong, but we also realized how much we are dependent on third countries. The initial moment was a shock, was a moment of dependency, and everyone was sending planes to China. We have to change this. We have to work on it that we will have our own supply chains, which will be not that much dependent in critical goods on other countries. It's our job to do it.
I don't feel comfortable neither with the word empire nor with the word liberal. Why so? First of all, I think words are important, and as a Roman, I can say that empire doesn't go down well in all parts of the world. For sure, in Rome it could be okay, but it's the concept. An empire is something that starts in a center and has a center of power, and that expands to the provinces. In any empire, you have the capital, you have the hill, the capital proper, and then you have the provinces that are places that are far away from the center of power and that are controlled and governed from the center. And this is not, I believe, the model of governance that works, and I think it's not the European way of conceiving governance. So I would rather... But I think that Europe and the European Union can be definitely one of the powers, one of the leaders, one of the centers of powers of the world. For sure, we are a normative center of power, probably most powerful than anybody else in the world, but also in other fields. Definitely, we are leading. In other fields, we're definitely behind. Look at technology, and I mean, we're definitely. But you cannot be a leader in all fields. We need also to choose not our battles, but our fields of excellence somehow. So I think that we can definitely, in a multipolar world that we're definitely living, I hope that we can be the multilateral leader, because we're living a time of multipolarism without multilateralism. And I think that I would like to see the European Union as the constructor of a new multilateral order, recognizing the multipolarity of centers of powers. So that goes against the concept of empire. And on liberal values are great, but I have the impression that in some parts of the world, including in some parts of Europe, if you take the economic angle of liberalism, this might be interpreted in different ways in different sectors of society. In some countries, including in some European countries, the liberalization of the economy has gone so far that is backfiring or has backfired, and some new forms of more moderate approaches to economic reforms is raising, or at least asked for. So I would play carefully with words, and also we have to come to terms, and we have to digest and handle. Somehow build a narrative and probably also do a little bit of psychological work on ourselves, on our colonial past. Because this is the way in which Europe is perceived in some parts of the world. But here we come to a contradiction that actually, if you look at member states, if I'm not wrong, 7 or 8 member states out of 27 have a colonial past, right? And even not all of these 7 or 8 had real, I mean, I can speak from experience, real colonial experiences. I mean, big. So I think that here we really have to break a narrative. And what we've seen in the Sahel recently, Niger recently, during the summer, is very telling, I think. And we cannot just close our eyes to that. Because in some places in the world, the European Union is associated to some member states only. And we have to break this. I can tell you also, again, by experience, in some places in the world, I realized that my nationality was an asset because I was not from a country that had a colonial past in that area.
We won't ask her name, no.
No, definitely not. In several places.
I think what you've stressed is extremely important because it shows us that it's a journey and it takes time. Psychology matters. Working on oneself matters, and working on one's perception matters. But I'd like to turn to you, Deputy Prime Minister Marichikj.
Thank you. First of all, I forgot. Actually, I didn't forget. I didn't have time, but I would like to especially commend Federica for all her work and efforts in the Western Balkans, because we have had so much help and support from her and from Commissioner Hahn at that time, because he was in the enlargement portfolio, that we really felt that we have European Union and Brussels institutions on our side. And all the efforts over the Prespa agreement are very valuable, but we also share the pain from the lack of decision at the end of 2019, which was a blow in the face of all the pro-European people in the Western Balkans and across the continent. On the empire, in the liberal empire, you know, there are two jokes in our region. First, at least two. I have time only for two. One is that we have bad luck that we are surrounded by the member states of European Union, because otherwise, if we would be on the Black Sea or bordering Russia, we would be in the European Union already. And the second joke about North Macedonia is that we are lucky that we have only 2 member states of the EU as neighbors, because Serbia has 4, so they will need to change the constitution 4 times. We need to change it only twice. So it is a joke, but it's not. The thing is that this is why I was speaking about the value-based union. And union sounds much better than empire, because union is the core of the European Union. And this is why we were insisting, when the member states were approaching to us with requests to, I don't know, change the name of our country, or to reinterpret the history in the way that, and particularly the later, the first one was more complex and under the UN auspices and related to our independence. But the second one, now we said, okay, the EU has to make a list of values that it insists on, and the list of things that they can ask from a candidate countries, because tomorrow a member state might ask from a candidate country for half of a territory to become a member, and I can easily imagine, for some examples, to become members of the European Union. I mean, we are not joining the Soviet Union, we are joining the European Union. It needs to be based on some values. So this is why, this is why I think the values are very important, and this is why the European Union has to stay European Union, not a liberal empire, because it's a peace project. Peace project cannot be an empire, and I think that that this is the spirit we need to nurture, because this is how it will work in the Western Balkans. You know, the generation of my parents was had much better young age youth than we did, because they were traveling visa-free with the Yugoslav passport. They could work in Slovenia, Croatia, and whatever they wanted without any permits, and they had higher living standard. When I was a university student, I was supposed to wait in a queue for a German visa, even for some time for Slovenian visa, Bulgarian visa, etc., which was very frustrating. And we can still not work in some of the areas of the EU freely. So these benefits of the European Union are probably underestimated by the young people and by the many citizens of the European Union. And this is the task of the politicians, to insist on the values and benefits of the European Union, because they are large. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I turn to you, Arancha.
Yeah, I mean, the European Union is a different animal in the zoo. And it renders itself very with a lot of difficulty to all categories. It's a new category, and it's a new category for a good reason. Now, this category was founded under specific conditions. And I think it's fair to say that these conditions today have changed. So, in my view, the EU needs some sort of new foundational moment. And in this foundational moment, in my view, there are 3 ingredients that we are missing, that we need to really get right in order to remain this specific creature in the history that we are. The first one has to do with our competitiveness. I don't know of any union or any empire or any solid international actor that is not seated on a very solid economy. We need a new drive to get the single market to work properly in the age of technology. The second space where we need to move very fast is on enlargement, because enlargement is a huge risk to to our geopolitical ambitions. We cannot be a geopolitical actor if we are surrounded by risks, and we will be surrounded by risks if we do not enlarge. So this should be our main objective in the short term. The third one is learning to weave well peace and war. We are a peace project. We should remain a peace project, but frankly speaking, we're living in a hostile world. So we better be prepared properly to defend peace, including by having greater capacity to do war. And this we better do together, not individually. Individually, we will not be able to have enough teeth, to survive in this more hostile world. That's the new foundational moment that the EU needs.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to raise one point that I find very important, and this is that we live in times, you mentioned technology, digital technology, that we are facing with very dangerous populism and disinformation. And this is something we really have to be aware and fight against it on many and all levels, because that is also related to perception, and you know how we are really struggling through this dangerous populism and narratives that are existing. And now with the artificial intelligence, so we are going through the very fast development. And we'll have to have a strong regulation on how to, and awareness what's going on around us, that we will really be able, in a political life and in a society, address those topics in a relevant way and also be relevant ourselves, and that people and generations will understand what is right, what is wrong, what are facts, what are lies. And this is all around us, and this is really somewhere that we will have to work hard.
Thank you very much. We only have 5 minutes left, and I must apologize. We will not be taking questions because I would really like to have concluding remarks from our panelists. So I'd like to start with a simple, not start, but end with a simple question. So seeing the end of the current European Commission, we have elections next year, the so-called Geopolitical Commission. What will it take for the successors to sustain all the efforts that have been made, the achievements that we have seen and that we have stressed here, and to increase the strengths of the Union? I'll start with you, Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay, thank you. I'll try. I think there are many positive things that this Commission has done, and I really think, in my opinion, better than expected. They have performed in some areas. What is important is to take the enlargement policy very seriously and build up on the statements yesterday and in these days. This new energy has to be kept high and worked with a plan on it. Otherwise, if it stays like the Thessaloniki promise, it will be a big disappointment. And I am sure that all the politicians and all the citizens of the European Union should know that it will come back with benefits if they support the enlargement now. The Western Balkans is not in the neighborhood, it's in the backyard of the European Union, because we are surrounded by member states of the European Union, and we have shown that we are credible partners in times of crisis, with the migration crisis, with the COVID crisis and everything that it came after, with Ukraine. So I think that keeping the European Union strong cannot mean more self-centered and more nationalized. To the contrary, I think more global and more open, building up on the current political will is crucial for strengthening the European Union. This is the only way to make it stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. So, in 1 minute, Rector Mogherini, I need to set the Deputy Prime Minister free because there is a press conference afterwards and you've got to be on time.
Thank you for reminding me. Okay, if you want, I can give you good excuses to be late. Sometimes it's a good strategy.
It would save my head, actually, so thank you for that.
I think that this last year, as traditionally is the case, the current leadership will try to set the stage for the next mandate, so setting priorities, and it looks quite clearly to be the case, to me at least as an observer today, that the priority that the current leadership is trying to set for the next leadership, whoever it will be, is to move on consistently on enlargement, which means looking at the budget, because we didn't talk about that, but Western Balkans in the European Union is quite doable, but Ukraine inside the European Union means a totally different approach to the budget, agriculture, cohesion. I mean, you need to reform drastically the European Union in all its policies. I mean, decision-making is the least. All the rest is much more difficult. So preparing for the enlargement to happen for real. But reality, I think, is that, here comes one of my favorite quotes, and it's from the Beatles, I guess, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. And no commission that I have ever known of actually was able to foresee what would have been their main topic beforehand, because things happen. And the US elections will determine very much, I think, what will be the priority for the next round of the leadership of the European Union. Because one thing is to rely on a strong alliance and partnership across the Atlantic in front of a complex geopolitical landscape elsewhere. Another scenario is to have difficult situations all over the place, and then you need a different kind of posture.
Thank you. That was a very long minute, I must say, but the Foreign Minister.
Thank you. I think the attack of populism is not overcome, and it will be a main challenge during the next elections. And the way the Commission will be created will depend on how the European Parliament will create and what the voters will say to us. So sometimes these slogans and promises of easy solutions can lead to a dead end, and we should be very much aware of that and be careful what we wish for. So my major expectations for next year is that we will be once again able to overcome the populist wave and settle for long-term rational solutions.
Thank you so much. Arancha?
Very simple. If you're a citizen, go and vote. Make sure that you vote. Make sure that you get your voice heard and that you put the ballot in the right box, because it will matter. It will matter for the future. And to the institutions that will come out of this election, and the elections will be decided by whatever we decide, I think it's about results. It's about delivering results. The plan is clear. I think the list that we've discussed here shows that we are all very clear about the results, about what needs to be done, but we need results. So I would put a results institution mandate.
Thank you so much. And our host is Deputy Prime Minister.
Just use 3 words to be really short. On the top of I already said, but it comes to my mind. Let us be honest, humble, and consistent.
Well, on those words, I think a tremendous thank you to our wonderful panel and a big roar of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you.